Hey guys, Robert and Ingrid here, and we have a very special episode of At the Movies. Well, it's not
Mm-hmm.
so much at the movies, more like at TV, but we
Mm-hmm.
just got done watching, well, I just got done watching, and she already had seen it before, The Legend of Vox Machina. And
Mm-hmm.
Ingrid, the show's yours here.
Yes. I am a became a fan of Critical Role in 2020 over the pandemic, listening to a lot of the podcast as sort of background noise while I worked, and I got really invested in it. And then I heard that they had done a Kickstarter to do an animated series that was originally just to do like a 22-minute animated special. And then their Kickstarter blew up and got 11 million bucks, which gave them enough to, okay, let's do a few more episodes. And then Amazon went ahead and picked them up, and it's just expanded up to two 12-episode seasons. And this is season one. To think that they were just going to start with what we saw in the animated pilot, which was a story that happened for the Vox Machina campaign before they started properly streaming, as well as one of the most popular arcs and one of the best arcs from campaign one, the Briarwoods arc. All edited down slickly with an absolutely star-studded voice cast, and you'd expect from a bunch of voice actors, some top-tier animation studios,
Mm-hmm.
and all coming together to make an adventure that is, well, in Robert's own words, a D&D style adventure directed by James Gunn.
Pretty much. And from what I just saw in the beginning, I mean, okay, if you've seen now again, James Gunn had nothing to do with this, but a lot of the trappings of of properly subverting, or at least maybe not even full on subverting, but leaning on subversion. Is that a good way of putting it? They lean on the
Yeah, there
subversion.
is a lot of tropiness in this, but it's not in a bad way. It's more to do shorthand than it is to do cliche.
Basically, the main Vox Machina, the main group, are a bunch of your typical, D&D party type crew in universe. But they're, watch out, we open up right away with a pastiche of the Lord of the Rings characters getting slaughtered.
So it immediately sets the tone for what you're
And it's
supposed to.
gruesome!
Yeah, it's just like, yep, this ain't your typical fantasy show.
And then we open up with what looks like a D&D board laid out with them holding the little figures and everything. I'm like, cute, cute, cute.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then we're actually introduced to Vox Machina, and they're that typical D&D crew. You have but at the same time, there's, especially compared to how they were, from what I understand, how they were in the original streaming, they've actually tweaked the characterizations a little bit. Like some characters that were purer in the streaming are a bit more crass in this one.
It's also that they had a chance to develop their characters throughout the entirety
Oh
of
yeah.
like the massive streaming, and then that sort of retroactively comes on to how they portray them a bit more slickly here.
Yep. And the voice cast you got Laura Bailey as Vex. You've got Tolson Huff and Chafe as Percy, Ashley Johnson as Pike, Matthew Mercer as Silas, as that's the main villain. You have Liam O'Brien as Vox, that's the twin brother of Vex. You have Marsha Ray as Keyleth. You have Sam Riegel as Scanlon, and Travis Willingham as Grog.
Mm-hmm. Couple of the pronunciations there were off, but
I know. I just got through watching it all, and there's not all,
Yeah, I get it. Lots of names. Lots.
I
Of
guess the ladies are great. They're the first ones that I really loved it here. I gotta think for strong ladies in this, these ladies are very strong.
Yeah.
I mean, and my favorite would have to be Pike. And just the idea of a gnome cleric and everything who, again, from what I understand, in the original stream, she was a bit more of a straight, type of, cleric and everything. But in this version, they're opening up with her being a bit more caught up in the way of her contemporaries.
Mm-hmm.
Am I in the right?
Struggles with that during the actual episodes.
Yeah, big time. But the fact we open up with them right in a bar, and they're all like, just drinking and everything, and well, shenanigans ensued. It ends up leading to them getting kicked out of the last bar in town.
Yep, it's just like same crap as always.
Yep. Now, yeah, with each of them, like Vex, she's pretty much the leader. Let's be honest.
Yep, pretty much everyone in the fandom would agree with you on that one. It's like Vox Machina has no leader, but actually it's Vex.
Right, definitely. I mean, well, because she seems to be the most level-headed of them. By comparison, she has her own issues, but by comparison, anyway. Percy, though, Percy would come the closest, being like the second in command almost. Him or Vax.
I suppose it really depends on the situation there, because
right.
Those are both two great guys. I think we can both agree that those two were awesome.
Pike, again, is definitely the token good character of the team. Even though, again, she's a bit more crass and prone to drinking and everything. You have, of course, with Vax, how would you describe Vax?
Honestly, he kind of is like, I feel like he's sort of the rogue with the heart of gold. Like, he looks so like suave and mysterious, but when you actually get up next to him, he's the one who's just as easily throwing jokes, and he's really kind-hearted, and he's got a cute thing with Keyleth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and Keyleth, she's... and while Pike is more just the straight-laced type of, good person, again, tweaked for the show, of course, Keyleth is definitely the sweet, innocent girl who definitely gets much more put through the emotional ringer throughout this.
Yeah, you could sort of tell, like, she's the college freshman who just, like, is seriously away from home for the first time and is trying to navigate the wider world.
According to TV tropes, she actually has a bit more heroism to her in this series than in the streaming. Or that she's a bit more reckless and self-righteous and preachy, not so much here.
Yeah, though you have to sort of, like, we have the caveat that with the actual original Vox Machina stream, they didn't start streaming at the beginning of the story, so Keyleth kind of got screwed over by the point where they were originally started in the story and got a lot of unnecessary hate, which is why I'm glad that and I really liked her from the original stream on the whole, so I'm really glad that we had a chance to kind of iron out that initial rough start so that people could see why the character was appealing. And that's why I like the approach the show took the adaptation. It's like, okay, we had something good to start with. Now let's make it even better.
Yeah, now, Scanlan, he's pretty much the Rocket Raccoon of the team. That type of very crass, like, as he puts, he wants to bet everything in the land. And and of course there's stuff going on between him and Pike, which I like. But he's one of those who, at times, he can be insufferable, but for the most part, he's a good guy. He's not none of these. That's the thing I love about this. None of these guys are the load. None of them are the load.
Yeah, it's like everyone has their own role to play at one point or another.
Exactly. And then you have Grog, who, he's the dumb muscle. He's very much like Drax, but I think he's even dumber than Drax by comparison.
I mean, he has an intelligence score of 6, which the average score is 10. There are some actual, like, animals
but he has his moments
that are smarter than him. But yeah, he does have his moments of being, like, really sensitive and, like, kind-hearted to people in his own way.
Well, not just that, though, but some of his funny moments as well can be really funny. But he has a big heart. I think that's the thing. His lower intelligence is countered by a bigger heart. And but willing to dive right in onto something suicidal if need be. The acid, anyone?
Oh, yeah,
we'll get to that.
Which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah, we open up with a two-parter that, well, like I said, opens up with them in a bar. We have that. There's a threat coming. No one knows what the threat is at first. But then, they realize we need money. And that's the other thing. They're unashamedly just in this for the money. At first.
It's just like, wow, we are broke. We don't have a job or prospects or anything. We need literally any job we can take.
Yep. Now, of course, Pike is the voice of, can we do this for good reasons for once?
Nah.
But to be fair, it also comes with her character type of, well, at least she sings anyway. So she sings. And I do love that subversion of it, where you think, I need to be pure to be at the best of my, holy abilities. Which I do like. That's what she's thinking.
Pure in a superficial way.
Yeah. Again, we'll get to that. But yeah, they answer this ad and they're brought forth, and yeah, everyone at first thinks like, oh no. Oh, I gotta say, the king liking them because they have a bear trinket. Yeah. I'm like, is this the Earth King from Avatar? Did you get that vibe from him? Given how the Earth King loves the bears, his bear?
I suppose it's been a while since I've seen Avatar, and I was sort of thinking more of the original stream and also of the badass casting of Carrie Payton. They chose
Cyborg.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
yeah, they
and
even sort of changed how the character looked from the original stream in order to fit Carrie Payton better.
That worked. It worked out. It worked, and you have General Krieg voiced by David frickin' Tennant.
Yeah, that was one hell of a good choice for just having a commanding presence to open.
More of an accent on his voice, of course.
It sounded like he was having a lot of fun with it.
Definitely, but yeah, they are tasked to go and find find whatever's killing everyone. So they go there. They go to a town, and this town is one of those typical medieval towns with a bunch of good-natured people that, even though the rest of the group, they can't bring themselves to be too assholes to. And that's the other thing I like. They're not total assholes. Sometimes you see these groups, sometimes when you have people want to subvert or push it, and everything, they make the people all insufferable assholes. No. When they're around good people, they're around good people. And they try their hardest to be good, at least. They might not succeed, but they at least put in effort. They're not like the type who will just say, they're not going to pull Legend of Zelda, kick down a door, and take their stuff. They're not chaotic evil. No, is that what it is? No, not chaotic evil.
They're not chaotic neutral.
They're not chaotic neutral, yeah. Let's be honest, those are the ones you usually think about when they're in this situation. The chaotic neutrals who feel like, I'm just going to be a complete dick to everyone just because that's in my nature.
Or at least the mimetic version of chaotic neutral.
Right. But here, they meet like a person as Pike, please worship our, put it, a prayer to our house. She does like whatever, like she's totally put off a little bit by it, I think. Or Vax is, messing with a kid and everything. And eventually they go out to find it. They find it's a dragon. An electric dragon.
Yep.
And they get their butts handed to them.
Which, that's roughly what you'd expect. And I feel like one of the moments that really sealed it for me, it's just like, hey, Keyleth, do something. It's just like, and you can tell it's just like she's just kind of doing the mental Rolodex of spell in her brains, and she casts something. She ends up calling down more lightning, which strengthens the thing on accident.
I would not say that was a natural, was it natural 2?
Natural 1.
Natural 1.
Was more of a case of the player is trying to pick a spell in panic and did not realize that was a spell that the enemy had resistance.
Right. Or worse, absorption 2.
Yeah, it's just like, that's
even worse.
Sort of the mistake you would make if you were just like right in the heat of battle for the first time.
And then it felt like this was, at least for her, possibly her first time doing something this dangerous. Like, we could have died, guys. It's like, you haven't been put in a situation like this before? That's what it feels like. It feels like this is them being put into something that's out of their element, or something they usually would avoid.
And it's just like they recognize it, and they're initially like, you know what? Screw this. This contract isn't worth it. We need to go back to the king and get out of this.
Then they find out, after the dragon took off, it ravaged and devastated the town. Which, as a dragon would do. You tick it off, it's just going to destroy the next town over.
And it's just like,
that's where at least you think they have a change of heart. And they do. They have decided, we're going to see this through. We are going to see this through. And now, we should point out, back with the king and the council, we've had this drow elf. And throughout all this, Vex is getting this weird, strong vibe, like a connection. Because she has a thing about dragons, given that's what killed her and Vex's parents, correct?
Correct.
And, so she feels like someone there is working with it. So, and of course, I be honest, I fell for it too at first. It just felt like that's what they're going to go. But as we went partway to the second episode, right before the reveal, I soon realized, no, wait. They're just playing on he's the red herring. It's like having the butler there, and you think the butler did it because it's so obviously the creepy butler. And then you realize, no, wait.
No, wait, that guy was just a spy master that just so happened to talk a bit funny.
And come off a bit asshole-ish. And then you find out it was General Krieg. And after we had a flashback where we saw that the dragon had attacked him and his crew long ago, turns out he killed and replaced Krieg. And why? He wants to manipulate things so he can finally convince the king to send out the troops so they can wipe it out and then they can take over the kingdom.
Yep.
And they fight him. After finding out his weakness, of course, they fight him, and they take him down in a pretty badass fight.
Yeah, that whole music sequence throughout that whole thing was just something that gives me goosebumps listening to it. It's just like they've been sort of absolutely meandering their way through this whole thing, and it's not like there's some perfect polished thing. It's kind of like watching a Rube Goldberg machine of destruction.
Exactly. And yeah, it was a great thing. If they ended it right there, it would have been a good self-contained thing, especially when they're told, at the end, how would you like to be? You are now honorary members of the council. How would you like to stay here and help protect our town? Which they're that's the other thing. They did it for the right reason, but they're still like, okay, where's our the big thing of money? Yes.
Huh?
Yeah. So it's like okay, they haven't gone fully altruistic, but you can still tell they're now taking it more seriously.
Yeah, and that was what they originally wanted to create. But then they got the money to adapt what is one of the best arcs of Campaign 1, the Briarwoods arc.
Oh, yes. Because at the very end, we were then introduced to the main villains for the rest of the series. Now, were there connections with them and the dragon, or was that all coincidental?
That one was more of a coincidence. It's more that they were taking advantage of the situations that the dragons left. But hold your thoughts on the dragons. That'll be important.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, we have Lord Silas Briarwood and Lady Delia Briarwood, voiced by Matthew Mercer and Gray Griffin. And yeah, when we're introduced to them, they're about to be abducted, attacked by some, what do they call it, road bandits or whatever. But
like that,
they take them out, no problem. And they come in there, and this is then where basically it's Percy's story for the good majority of the rest of the series. And this, okay, I've been yapping. You continue on.
Basically, we start this whole thing with a traumatic flashback from Percy's perspective of his entire family dying. And it seems that not even the presence of the hot Vex can ease his mind's pain. Because as it turns out, now the king is now calling together a security council from across the realm because they think that there's something bigger going on with these dragons. With that
logical belief, especially given what the dragon was saying.
And so they're gathering together all of the dignitaries, and our ragtag team Vox Machina has to put on formal and play fancy, which Percy seems to be especially invested in. Which it becomes clear why. It's because he was one of a noble family known as the Derolos that the Briarwoods all killed, and then basically took over their city of Whitestone from. And so,
unfortunately, he lets his emotion get the better of him and attacks one of their servants.
Oh, yeah. It's basically watching this whole tense dinner scene where they're literally sitting right across from this guy, and Percy's kind of tight-lipped throughout the whole thing because...
Tight-lipped and tight-assed.
Tight-lipped and tight-assed, that is a very fair description.
That's exactly how he was
Meanwhile,
coming
Vex
off.
goes on a stealth mission to try and figure out what the Briarwoods are up to while doing his whole roguish thing, which ends up going quite wrong.
Yeah.
And basically ends up taking the rest of the gang into an altercation, which ends up looking really bad in front of the king. And so now they're under house arrest for having attacked a couple of dignitaries.
Well, thanks to Lady Allura, of course, because she at least had the sense of like, okay, you guys aren't idiots. I mean, you're unorthodox. You might fuck things up, but as the saying goes, but you're not. You're not. This doesn't sound like you. And she hears them out like, and the king has been acting weird. So
because Silas, who is actually a vampire, managed to charm him, which was sort of the reason why the Briarwoods made this trip, so they'd stay out of their business.
Exactly. Now, do you think he and she charmed him well beforehand, or when they arrived?
Probably when they arrived, because they hadn't nobody had left Whitestone in a long time.
Very true. Very true. And yeah, so they, after a bit of shenanigans, finding with a book and everything, and eventually a bunch of zombies that Lady Briarwood had unleashed on them, which that was definitely one of the moments where I feel like Keeley, again with her, it seems to be most of the time where you have this feeling of trying to scramble for initiative is with her. She seemed like she rolled a natural 20 to save the day.
Mm-hmm.
Given how pretty much fucked they were fucked. This would have been a team moment.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's very true to the game. Sometimes everything is going sideways, and then there's just that one magic roll that ends up saving you. What's also very accurate is their struggle with all of the doors. That is often a struggle where...
The greatest enemy, doors! They seem to never get the right roll on them.
Mm-hmm. It got to the point where my DM just started saying, okay, you know what? The door's open already. Don't waste a half hour on this again.
Mm-hmm.
But I digress.
Yeah. Right. Which leads to a gag we'll get to later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so they are eventually able to get out of town, although unfortunately during all this, Pike's her little necklace and all that connects her with the Everlight is broken, and she feels she's been cursed. So she's going to go back to a temple and hopefully see if she can communicate with the Everlight. After a little suggestion from Grog's, maybe you should shout more. And it's all been made very clear those two have a longer history than the rest of Vox.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true, and we'll probably be seeing more of that in season 2. Though how they adapt it, I can't say.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and then of course, as they do leave, and so she goes her own way, and they go on their way to what was it called? Briarwood? No, not
Whitestone.
Whitestone. They head off to Whitestone, and first they get all they need to do with a vampire and everything. Unfortunately, they lose it all. Yeah, especially after they seem to throw a lot of their money to get all those resources, and then bye-bye, off a cliff. There goes their holy water.
Mm-hmm. Whoops.
But once they get there, and it's during all this, we start to get a good understanding of Percy, but it comes more to a head once they get there.
Uh-huh, because as it turns out, the town is an absolute shithole now.
Oh, big time. And the Briarwoods, oh God, what did they do to make a message to Vox Machina? They take a bunch of families and then dress them up like Vox and then hang them all.
Yep,
as a message.
Yeah, the Sun Tree moment was just as chilling here as it was on screen, just to realize, shit, it's us.
Two children to represent the gnomes.
It's just, that instantly sells just what kind of people these are that you're dealing with.
Exactly. And one of his own childhood friends, Archibald, he's been leading the resistance. And we also find out we've been watching Percy working with this weird gun.
Mm-hmm. And it's just like, it's interesting because I see a lot of the comments like, hey, you have all of these characters who are wielding fantasy weapons you would expect. And then there's this one guy with a gun. But oh boy, is there a reason for that.
Oh, big time. But again, you think like, what's with this gun? And oh yeah, and you also have this great moment where they're explaining about their favorite or their strangest, fights and everything. Keeley knock a guy in the lava and then stepping on him. From what I understand here, they make it more of a dark comedy where she's like, quiet, quiet, quiet. Whereas in the other one, she was just trying to kill him faster.
Oh, yeah. I love how they managed to sneak moments that they probably wouldn't have been able to give a full adaptation to that sort of like defines the character to some degree.
Even if it means making boxes, from what I heard, it's a much more dramatic. Here, they make it a gag.
Yeah, that's definitely true, but it's one of those things where, hey, I can understand the trade-offs they did there.
Right.
And sort of balancing for longtime fans versus a wider audience.
Exactly. And hey, you still get something that's close enough, at least. Or something that fits what their later characterization is. Like, Keeley, I think that's something that fits her with what we've been seeing of her,
Just like,
Shut up, you.
And it doesn't realize exactly what the consequences are going to have until they happen. It's like, oh, please stop.
And then they're looking at her like...
a horror flashback in her eyes.
And they're looking at her like, yeah. And then, of course, Scantra is all like, Scanla is like, yeah, his conquest was with a lady. It's just like...
That's
yeah, but even I was more where I'm like, but that's also where I'm like, okay, you truly have no shame. You truly have. Up until this point, I thought you might have some shame. No, this is the moment where I'm like, you have no shame whatsoever.
Hmm.
Hold on. Sorry. But anyway, but that was before they got there, the town, of course. But once they were dead and we see everything, that's then when the shit starts to hit the fan. And all the while with Pike, okay, let's just sum up Pike's arc. Turns out a lot of her issues are from herself. She thinks that the light had, ever bright has, cut her off. It didn't. She did it to herself. Why? Because she assumed I made myself out of favor with her.
Which is, as you were like telling me before, definitely a twist to do on this kind of arc.
Yeah, normally you would think, oh yeah, the moment you become even a little bit despoiled, you're going to be diminishing your powers to the point where she was convinced I can only heal once a day. But then it turns out once it talked to her and everything, made it realize and what made you think I lost favor with you? Because of this, I decided instead of doing this, I become more drinking and more loving the violence and all that. And basically said, where was this a problem? So long as you're still following your truth and not being a monster.
And it's kind of an interesting way for them to sort of adapt how she originally started as like a life subclass cleric and then moved on to a war subclass cleric. Like, someone needs to be able to kick some holy rear too.
Exactly, and it feels like they decided to have it be where she's already become the work, that, but she hasn't realized it, and she's still holding on to the views of the former. Would you say that's about right? Like she's still assuming the rules and the views of the former, not realizing that no, it's not bad that you changed.
Something like that, yeah. And it's just like she ends up being able to inspire a lot of the rest of the common folk and light up their own weapons so that they can then...
Well, that's later. We're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
I just wanted to just get her part out of the way. But yeah, once they're there, it's just... again, a lot of great action. And yes, there's that point you mentioned with the door where they're trying to lockpick the door. They can't do it. And then sure enough, someone, which I bet you was the dungeon master, being like, okay, let me get away for them to open the door. Someone comes out to toss out the bucket of piss.
Didn't get away from it unscathed in any case.
Yeah, but let's be honest. You could so tell if this was a real D&D. That was the dungeon master being all like, okay, oh Lord, let me just throw him a boat here.
Yeah.
That's clearly what that was. That was just like, At that moment, someone came through and with a bucket of piss and tossed it. And I just loved it that how when they meet up by this point, also Keyless is suggesting to Vex, we need to rescue all these people that are enslaved in here. What do they do? So when they get their box, like, what's with them? Oh, found them along the way and happened along the way. Do you smell like? You smell like piss? Happened along the way. Again, just stuff like that. And again, it's just so. Again, crass is the big word I keep using here, but that's what it is. It's very crass. Until we get to the point where Percy goes after someone who he has on a list. And we find out that gun comes with a mask and seems to be almost unlimited ammo, but also smoke covering him.
Mm-hmm. What we, the fandom, call him as No Mercy Percy.
Oh, really? On TV tropes, it was just called the Smoke.
Yeah, well, No Mercy Percy has been the longtime fandom nickname for that.
Yeah, and well, that fits. Basically, he made a deal with it was a demon.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's also known as Orthax.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that's the name of the demon anyway. And it basically has given him the ability to go after all those who wronged his family. And they're written on the gun.
Yeah, it's just like, it was really neat to just see, ooh, yes, they kept that in. And you can see him clicking on the barrel and seeing each of the names.
Yep. And he goes overkill when he shoots them.
Yeah, to the point where it's like the rest of his teammate, who we've established aren't people who are like very much into niceties, like they're freaked out by his stuff. Like, what the hell is going on?
And he's brushing it off. And he's brushing it off because it's coming right the hell out of nowhere for them. It's like, when have you been able to do this? What the hell is wrong with you? And what is with that smoke?
Mm-hmm.
And again, he just brushes it off. And at first, it doesn't seem that major. It just feels like, well, he's just pulling some moves he never needed to use before.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe he's got a bit more of a temper, but given the circumstances, that's understandable.
It's personal.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Then we find out his sister, who got left behind, believed dead, is still alive. And oh boy, that's a whole twist I didn't see coming either. But again, felt much like a D&D twist that the Dungeon Master would just pull.
Yeah.
But yeah, they eventually then decided we need to go back in there and get her out. His sister. Mm-hmm. Why? Because she's been used to subjugate, basically make sure no one rises up.
Uh-huh. Basically a pawn of the Briarwoods.
Yep. So they decide, okay, now Scanlan that says, I'm going to distract them. From what I heard, understood, it was much more effective in the stream. Is that true?
I would definitely say it was a bit more impactful in stream, if only because there's no way you could have made that shit up.
Right, but here, it doesn't go as well for him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it does not. Now, you can tell he's trying, and he chose to do this. Mm-hmm. That's the thing I do like about him, and makes him different from Rocket. He's willing to put his life on the line.
Even if it is doing something incredibly stupid.
That's what he does.
More than a little bit boneheaded.
But it's what he's good at. That's the thing. He knows what he can do. And he's like, hey, I know what I can do. You're all the ass kickers. I'm just a distraction. Let me go distract.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he thinks it's going to go perfectly going to plan. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but it worked. They get their way in. And then we have the professor, the person who betrayed Percy and Cassandra, who felt he was basically, okay, Percy's parents were not the greatest.
Mm-hmm. It's fair enough to say that.
Yeah, I'm not saying they were total assholes, but they were set in their ways.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a good way of describing them? I mean, you know more than I do about them.
That's a reasonable impression to get from what we've seen.
Yeah, it felt like he wanted to teach them certain things. He had all these theories about what to do, and they didn't want anything to do with it. Percy and Cassandra, though, seemed to care, but as far as the professor was concerned, you're no different.
Mm-hmm. And he
basically tells you
them in light of that.
yeah, which tells you, I mean, in other cases you would have to be, he would have made them an exception. No, in his eyes, you're no different.
Yeah, it's just like, we're all sons of bitches, Percival. Especially you, from the bitch who bore you.
Exactly. As far as he's concerned, you're your parents' kids, no matter how you act.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gives himself a literal, pretty much a silver tongue.
Yep. Because
and that moment where Cassandra nearly got killed.
Oh yeah, that was just.
And then Keela is like all freaked out. And I love, and then you get a great funny moment where you think she's dead, and then Cassandra like, ah! There's that weird animation, the animation nailed it. Of course, Keela's like, ah!
And it's just like, I mean, that's perfectly in line with everything else we've seen Keyleth do.
Exactly. It was just like, ah! It was, but seeing her freak out, but it also sets up something for later, of course. Wait a minute. Mm-hmm. Is this before or after the stuff with Vax confessing?
That would come later during the zombie incursion.
Okay, just want to double check. But yeah, then they go. Then yeah, the next episode, majority of that is the fight with the professor, who's taking control first of Grog and then the others.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an intense fight. I will give it. And then what does Percy do? Gets a good shot in and takes the guy's whole lower jaw out.
Yeah, that was quite literally jaw-dropping.
Yep, and then you have that moment, while they're dealing with the tongue, you have that moment where he walks right past Keyleth, and it's like one moment he's his normal self, next he has the mask on.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good transition. And then, yeah, kills the professor. Deserved it, if you ask me.
Yeah, that was one real piece of work.
But he was definitely coming off even worse than he did before. Percy was.
Mm-hmm.
People are even more freaked out now. But now they feel like, grab what you can, let's get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when Dolores is like, we need to speed up the timetables. Also, during this, we find out, yeah, her husband died. She's a necromancer, basically.
Uh-huh, and she apparently made a deal with this entity called the Whispered One to, hey, bring my husband back and I'll be happy to serve you.
And release you.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, and she doesn't care what she did to bring him back.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, they decided, let's up the timetables and everything. But she also unleashes another undead horde.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point you have Scanlan Scanlan gets bit.
Oh yeah.
Oh crap. And Archibald gets cut right in half.
Yeah, it's unceremoniously, no fanfare.
That he survived in the original stream, but it makes sense here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like, you can't have as many characters in this as you could have in a typical D&D.
Especially once you just added Cassandra on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and you have one where Percy's basically, takes down one of the generals there, and basically like, you're not on my list. I leave your fate to the rest of the people. And they kill him. They string him up and everything.
String him up on the same street where he confessed he hung up those kids.
Yep. And at the same time, this is when Pike shows up. Great moment of Scanlan saying, marry me. Sure, let's do it right now. Wait, what? And Vax confesses he's in love with Keela. They're about to get wait, right here, right now? Not the right best time, man. That look on Keela's face, it's just wait, seriously, here? Yeah, again, just great characterizations.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to set up because it sets up a line later. Yeah, there is something going between Vex and Percy, to the point where she calls him darling.
Oh, yeah.
That's up for later.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel like there is a lot of either good and a lot of good pairings. I mean, you have Pike and Scanlan, Vex and Keyleth, and Vex and Percy.
Mm-hmm.
Grog is Grog.
Yeah.
There's no one really you need to pair him up with. He's content with being good friends with Pike.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so now Pike is here as a what's the word I'm looking for? A astral projection.
Yeah, it's like she was channeling the power of the temple in order to show up there, basically.
And she heals Scanlan and everything, and it felt like how much of a level up do you think she got now?
Well, that's actually an adaptation of some IRL circumstances where Ashley sort of had to go elsewhere in order to film for a show. And so there were times that when she was able to get on, she got on through a Skype call. And so she was quite literally in universe.
Astral
predicting herself in universe there.
Which just felt like that she gained a huge level upgrade. This was, actually going by D&D rules.
I feel like it's more of like an environmental thing where it's just like, yeah, she can use those powers because she's channeling the energy of the temple, but otherwise she'd just be.
Oh, it does look like it does still look like she can, at the very end, looks like she can still do more than one heal a day now.
Yeah.
Or at least it feels like she got over that hurdle anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's with them now the rest of the way, glowing, and they basically have a walking nightlight. That's
Frog-handling points out.
Yep. And but when they're there, they have to go and they find this woman, Dr. Ripley, who, geez, talk about this is the case where you have these big moral dilemmas.
Because she's somebody on the list, and she is somebody who has tortured Percival and Cassandra in the past to help the Briarwoods, but at the same time, she's one of the only people who has the information necessary to be able to stop the Briarwoods' plans.
But given what we find out with Cassandra, her words make more sense. It makes a lot more sense, because especially tell me about off the way when she says, I spend all this time with them, but I don't know their plans. It's like. Something felt off about that, didn't it? The way that felt like an oddly specific phrasing, didn't it? But yeah, so they decided. Now, also, why does she have her own busted version of the gun? You can spoil whatever comes down the line.
No,
or is that new? Or is that new?
Inventor that's sort of, tried to look into Percy's work to some degree.
All right. Yeah, because basically she is his intellectual equal, pretty much.
It's just like, Percy could kind of understand later on that, like, hey, maybe it shouldn't be great that this particular weapon of destruction gets into wider hands, whereas Anna Ripley doesn't necessarily have those same qualms about morality and is happy to be able to sell
Voiced by Kelly Hugh, by the way. Happy
to sell that stuff to anyone that'll turn her a profit. And this winds up having widespread consequences within the actual lore of the game. And the world is now able to have guns because of that.
Ooh. But like I said, yeah, Kelly Hugh, great job as Ripley. And as they're going on, there's a point where Cassandra says, like, hey, every day you have to talk to someone that's of your intellectual equal. Oh, thank you. Wasn't a compliment. I love when they say, like, it's a compliment or wasn't a compliment. I love that, especially when you have someone say, like, I'm, and all that. But it's like, but then they make it through to this area where there's all this acid being utilized.
They were sort of using it to refine some of, like, the magical mineral, the residuum, in order to be able to build up this place called the Ziggurat underneath Whitestone to be able to perform their ritual to summon the Whispered One or whatever.
Yep, and this is where the twist is with Cassandra. She's not on the good side. She's basically suffering a bit of the charm, but also Stockholm Syndrome.
And you know how they do this? You know how they establish she's turned? Her name shows up on Percy's gun.
I noticed that. But I didn't think much about that at first. I just thought, wait, is this thing messing? That's what I was thinking. I thought it was messing, given how we later find out that, the smoke and everything will put any name on there. Anything to keep him with Percy. So that's what I thought was more thinking. I was more thinking that, is it trying to do that because it wants to screw with him? I didn't think about that first. But yeah, so they're locked in. Vax has been charmed and taken away. And this leads to a big moment of, this acid is rising up. And then they realize we got to flip these switches to close stuff, but one's in the acid. So what does Grog do? Just strip Ellie. I'm on it.
Not even hesitating.
Doesn't hesitate. Of course, Pike is like, "I'll heal you," and she just keeps healing him the whole way down. But yeah, so they pull it, they ask his release, and then you had that moment where she's healing him up. It's like, "How's little Willie still hanging?" They're like, "Forgot my drawers." Again, so funny. He's so funny. But yeah, then that leads to the confrontation with them. And good boy howdy, it's in a grand confrontation.
They definitely pulled out the stops here.
Yep, Percy is fully taken in and by everything. He doesn't care anymore. And of course, like, I thought this was going to be stealthful. Oh, going and charging? Okay. The Briarwoods are pretty tough. Fabulous Keyless is the one who actually turns the tide because you have all these roots everywhere. We didn't establish what exactly is Keyleth.
Keyleth is a druid of the Air Shari people, which is basically one of four elemental tribes that kind of, sort of keep balance between sort of the various elemental planes and this world. It's definitely more than a bit inspired by Avatar, but does it in its own way. And basically, she's on a journey to one day become their new leader, the voice of the Tempest.
But as I say, but at the same time, what does the druid do? They tap into nature, and you have all these roots and everything growing on where they're at. Yeah, not the best of ideas for them to do. Would you agree with that?
I mean, it seems like they were more interested in looking at particular sites of power and weren't necessarily 100% on board with...
They had no idea Drew was going to come, of course.
Yep, they couldn't necessarily have expected that.
So,
especially since they were playing it so hard with the diplomacy game.
Exactly.
But
I don't think they even realized about all the vines. They just probably was just part of the scenery to them. Because if they were smart, they would have realized, crap, they have a druid. You know. But yeah, she turns it on, takes out Salen, and then Dallas is, oh gosh, she's devastated.
Yeah,
but of course, Merciless and No Mercy Percy is pissed
because the kill got stolen. That was supposed to be his,
and he just let Ripley run off. That was the other thing. She ran off, so he's doubly pissed. And yeah, so it soon leads into becomes the big threat. Then, well, no, first Dallas tries to conjure up the Whispering One, but then they're able to they're able to stop. No, I'm afraid that Keyless also gets wounded. Pike tried to fix her, but now did she run out of time, or was it because of the Whispering One stuff that dissipated her?
Well, the ritual ended up creating an anti-magic zone, basically.
That's why Salen couldn't even use his own enchantments. So yeah, but they're able to. Bax is able to do similar to what Keyless did for Cassandra. Is able to heal her, and yeah, basically you have and that going. They seem to stop the ritual, and then Orthax makes himself known and just loses his shit.
Oh yeah.
And that was big. It was basically, and that's from what I've learned. And what was the big moment? The big line everyone waiting for. What was that moment?
Darling, take off the mask.
Yes, that. I never even watched their stuff, but even I could tell that was a big moment.
And they shifted that around for maximum impact, and I'm glad they did.
Yeah, and takes off the mask. And he is fighting it all the way, and then he shoots himself in the hand, and you think the thing escapes or whatever. Which then, of course, leads to Scalen throwing it in the acid, and it turns out it was in there. How'd you know it was in there? Lucky guess. And Cassandra kills Lady Briarwood, and it's like she went nuts in that moment. And Day is saved. Cassandra's going to stay in lead because Percy, he is no fit to rule.
And he recognizes that. It's like, I need to heal from my trauma before I'm fit to lead anybody.
Of course, Cassandra thinks like, what makes you think I'm any more fit? You're a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And she no longer has the charm on her, so you can't fully blame her because of that charm.
Mm-hmm.
Keyleth and Vax, she says like, it's not going to work. It can't work.
At least not right now.
Right, of course. And then she uses her own spell that basically is doing her equivalent of a what's it called in video games? Where you can quickly get from one end to the other. Fast travel. Basically, she does that by if there's a tree that's alive that she's seen, she can connect right to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what she does to get him back. But right when they do, the king decides to step down.
Mm-hmm.
And understandably so.
It's like there's a couple of major faux pas in the recent thing. It's just like, hey, I'm going to cede this to the Council of Taldore, and who's on the Council of Taldore?
Right?
Well, they're honorary members, and who is on the Council of Taldore is kind of a running gag, so that's why you don't hear who else is actually on it.
Yep, but then cliffhanger ending, and what is coming?
Dragons. 4 of them. You remember that there was that rug that had the 5 dragon heads of the different colors at the beginning? Yup. Krieg, or rather Brimscythe, was just the baby. And now they're dealing with 4 ancient adult dragons known as the Chroma Conclave. Fortunately, Season 2 is already greenlit, so you don't have to worry about waiting too long, hopefully.
Hopefully, but given the animation and everything...
Well, I think it'll be well worth the wait.
But yeah, this was so good. This was so damn good. Everything about it felt like there's a great character art, but there's still more to come. Each one had their own moment, but at the same time, it's basically like a D&D thing. They change. They come out the other side completely different than they were at the start, but they're still ready for more.
Mm-hmm.
And they have no choice in this regard, of course.
Yep, there's not much choice you have when a bunch of 4 angry dragons show up on their doorstep because you killed one of their allies.
Now, from what I understand, that first 2-parter was an original story, wasn't it?
It was something that came from material before they started properly streaming Vox Machina.
Right, so
yeah, using it as an establishing arc.
Which worked.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so... Overall, I mean, this was greatly animated, greatly acted. Everyone had great moments, and again, just such strong characters. And again, what I just love is how it felt real. It didn't feel like one of those boring type of sometimes when people think D&D type stuff, they just think everyone is all like set in their characters, whatever the type, their archetype.
I feel like it really shows that these are characters that were essentially written by the voice actors that are playing them, and that sort of ends up shining through hugely. They all come through uniquely because they all essentially have their own individual writer. No one ends up being wasted because everyone on the cast, literally and figuratively, has a voice. And I hope that this will kind of show that, hey, maybe you can do writing a different way than you typically have been. You can still have your tropes, but you can explore on them in a different, unique, and personal way. And maybe stuff that's a little bit messy at times, too. And I'm glad to see that the show has had a wide appeal even outside of the original Critter base.
And now that it proves the versatility of D&D that so many of those who want to change it for woke, progressive stuff don't get. They don't get it. I mean, heck.
It's like, there was definitely a lot of kind of stuff like that in here, but it didn't really feel like it was there for that. It's just a fantasy world that
felt like something you would do in a session.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It felt like something you would do.
Oh, the shopkeeper is maybe a little bit flirty with you, so you take advantage of that fact to get more information about the dragon.
You might not swing that way, but hey, you'll play up to it. Or do you think Vox does swing both ways?
Oh, it's confirmed he does.
Okay. Yeah, but of course, I always say this like, oh yeah, where's the fun in just only swinging one way when you're doing a fictional character? I mean, obviously it depends on the character, of course, but okay, so obviously this whole campaign eventually does reach an end like it did in the original. Could you give me at least an idea of how their campaign ended? Like, did it end good? Did it end good for everyone, or?
It ends mostly happy, but with a couple of bittersweet notes. Basically, they managed to save the world, but at the sacrifice of one of their members permanently. And this is in a world where you can have resurrection magic. But I won't say who it is because spoilers.
Right.
But
You can tell me. You can tell me offline, off the air.
It's just like they do end up saving the world. They do end up becoming great heroes, but not everyone ends up making it home in the end.
Yeah, a question when it comes to D&D. You have all of these big moments and everything, and obviously not everyone knows what other campaigns are doing, obviously. How does that play up into it when you have people who are like, especially if you ever have someone, they leave their party, they go to another party, if that ever happens, and all that. And you get me, where you had these big events, and then it's a matter of who has the bigger resume by comparison. And I always wonder how you can reconcile that with a world like that.
Well, honestly, the most important thing is to have a good session 0 before you even start properly playing, so that you can set everybody's expectations for what they expect to see in the game. What's roughly, on the broad strokes, what sort of content they're expecting. What kind of stuff they do and don't want to see.
And is that also part of the reason why you don't...
groundwork understanding of what they're expecting from the game.
All right, and also, do you think that's also probably why, from what I've understood, some people don't prefer you bring a character from another campaign to a different group? From what I understand.
Yeah, because there's sort of like, it can sort of like color your expectations and your visions too much, because it is ultimately a collaborative storytelling experience, which means everyone needs to have a bit of give and take in order to cohere as the whole. You can't necessarily try to like hog the spotlight too much, or just.
Oh no, I'm saying though, if a whole group brought their old characters in.
I mean, it entirely depends on the particular setting and the dungeon master in question. Perhaps the dungeon master is a lot less serious about that kind of thing, and it's just like, you know what, we're here to have some fun, and perhaps one maybe has a bit more legitimate, has a bit more like of like a developed expectation for like their world and their setting. It's just like, hey, I would like you to just sort of play along with the same expectations as me. It's great because, everyone can kind of work together to define your own experience, but there has to be agreement at your own table. And a lot of the arguments online start because people aren't respecting that everyone at their own table does their own games differently. Some people are more into lore. Some people are more into power gaming. The difference isn't necessarily that style of game, but rather what you've agreed upon with the people with you. And I feel like a lot of the people who are trying to gatekeep D&D from either side of the spectrum don't really understand that D&D isn't fundamentally... It isn't something that's fundamentally experienced in a big way, but it's in a little way, with every one of you in a Discord call or around a single game table.
Right.
D&D is an experience that is like as unique as every table, and when people lose that, you lose the spirit of the game, and I feel like that's the most concise way I can put it.
I think a good example, and I gotta show you this. You've ever heard of the little independent movie called Gamers?
You vaguely mentioned it once or twice, and I keep meaning to get around to see it.
I could send you it, actually, but in the second one, because the first one basically had a different group altogether. Doesn't end well for them, actually, in the real world. It's basically part of its own myth arc. But in the second one, you're dealing with a whole new group of characters. And you have, one of them is this guy who plays as a female elf. And of course, in universe, the actress who plays the female elf plays his teacher at school.
Mm-hmm.
But the funny part is, if he ever breaks character, you have the guy actor in the dressed up in the outfit. And they'll be like, excuse me? All right. So, changes and turns back into the hottie. So the dungeon master, Unfortunately, he's gotten fed up with everyone. They don't take it seriously. They're not following the story. They'll blow up an NPC. Now, one of them quits, so they bring in this other girl. She's never done D&D before. But she wants to do it right. And just to make sure that they get things on track, the Dungeon Master puts his own NPC in, like an NPC character, a paladin, in there to keep him on track. Which I know is a big no-no. That's a big no-no.
Yeah, like I said, collaborative storytelling experience. The DM is also a player, but the players also define things, and it's generally found it's either good to agree upon a module beforehand or have the DM sort of
they're testing a module, though. They're testing a module is what the whole point of it is, but they're not testing it well. Like, the first thing they do is just blow up an NPC that the girl was talking to, and it's just all like, how many XP do I get for that? It's like, you just blew up a simple farmer. Why? Because the other thing is, it's the notion of, they're like, oh, we know where we're supposed to go. You know. Your character doesn't know.
Metagaming.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where they've tried it so much that the guys doing it are like, why should we care? But again, you have bunch of great characters, and by the end of it all, though, but they have some real funny stuff. Like, one of them has a bard who has high charisma. Why? He wants to bet everyone and everything, much like Scanlid. But
yep, the horn bard is definitely a trope.
Unfortunately, though, in this case, he realizes the bard sucks. At least he keeps dying. So what does he do? He makes a big stack of other bards that just keep filling in the place. And then, and every time he dies, new one, new one, just keeps on going. Then eventually they realize, hey, wait a minute, I have all these dead bards. Just pile them up and use it as a shield. I'm like, but that's the moment where they start to have fun with it. And it's basically you have this guy, again, he's trying to stick too much to following the module. And yet, so he's being an ass about it. But at the same time,
I've started to play in modules too, and even then, we've managed to find ways to break it because we've playing it a little bit differently. Like, hey, apparently these hag sisters really don't like each other. What if instead of trying to fight them directly, we make them think that their sisters are getting up on each other and let them tear each other apart?
Exactly. But then, what does he do at the very end? He throws them a bone because they're dealing with a bad guy that they're still not ready for. So what does he do? But they've been through this before. Other team parties have been there before. So he reveals there's a chest that has all of the old weapons, all of the great trinkets, weapons, everything they have, stabs, swords, all that. Everything from prior games are in that chest.
Oh, that's
so they
really
actually
clever.
Take them and use it to defeat it.
That is actually really clever, and I would absolutely love if a DM did that in Universe, where it's just like, hey, here's all of the stuff of all of your old characters to beat this BBG.
Now, of course, though, the jag is in Universe, there's a lightsaber and all that. You're just like, what? Something wasn't right here, but you can tell it's just for a visual gag and all that. But again, I mean, I'll link you to it, but it's that type of thing where you could definitely tell the type of D&D stuff going on here. You know what I mean? And basically, and yeah, from what I heard, the creator of D&D, what's his name? What was his name?
Gary Gygax?
Yeah, he approved of it. Because when they did the first one, no, D&D wasn't involved, but because they loved the heart they did in the first one, they supported the sequel wholeheartedly.
Oh, that's neat.
There was a third one, but it's nowhere near as good. It dealt more with a card-based type of D&D stuff.
That's probably a rip on 4th edition, let's be real.
But yeah, though, I mean, overall, again, for not being in the D&D, though, sometimes stuff like this makes me want to get into it, but I also know that can be very time-consuming.
Completely understandable, and I'm glad that stuff like this exists to sort of give you a very, I'm not sure what the right word for it, but convenience store version.
Right. So, yeah. Well, and glad you showed me this, and I will show you gamers, and maybe we can come back and talk about those. We do have Jurassic World coming up soon.
Ooh, that sounds like fun.
We have
Though
that.
I'm going to be going on a trip to Sweden in 2 weeks, so...
Oh, well, it's coming up this weekend. Maybe we can fit that in.
Ooh, fair enough.
Maybe.
We'll see. No guarantees.
Right. But, hey, until then, we'll see you all in the next one. Take care.